Good evening and welcome back into Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex. Lord, a lot of news today on both the Braves front and the Falcons front. We will start with the Falcons. We'll start with an extension. We have a 2-year, $30 million contract extension for right tackle Kaleb McGary. Now, in a nutshell, just looking at the right tackle position and where Kaleb McGary ranks, maybe slightly above average altogether. But he is now Michael Penix's blind side. So this is the most important position on the offensive line. So it's a good deal for a right tackle that's slightly above average compared to starting right tackles. But when you consider, hey, he could be here for 3 more seasons protecting Michael Penix's blind side, a little more like, especially considering what does he struggle with? Pass blocking. He ranked 73rd out of 140 according to Pro Football Focus as a pass blocker last season among all tackles.
Yeah, I mean, last year, let's take it with a grain of salt, though. The guy was protecting a literal statue. A literal statue. The guy, Kirk Cousins, may have been the worst quarterback. I don't have the stats in front of me about like avoiding sacks, whatever that stat is, where it's like how many sacks were quarterback sacks, where like, a guy's moving around the pocket. Joe Burrow is one of the best in the business in terms of avoiding sacks. And so Michael Penix is pretty decent about it too. So take it with a grain of salt, but he isn't great by any means. Nobody's going to confuse him with, a Joe Staley-esque, guy who's been a stalwart on that corner. I think if you're the Falcons, it's almost like the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, where like you could probably upgrade, but then again, it could go horribly, horribly wrong. And this is one of those things that you don't want to mess with. And he is criminally hated by Falcons fans. He is not as bad as some Falcons fans make him out to be. And I think Zach Robinson, it's on him just as much as Kaleb McGary to kind of help Kaleb McGary, whether it's the run game, whether it's in pass protection sets, whatever it might be, rolling Michael Penix out, all those things can help Kaleb McGary. You ask Kaleb McGary to have a, Michael Penix in a 7-step drop with, Nick Bosa on the other side, you're setting yourself up for failure. You just got to minimize those situations.
And we saw that at week 1.
Steelers,
TJ Watt, what he was able to do to Kaleb McGary. But that was also, as much as we could sit here and blame Kaleb McGary, I think when we came up here and talked about this, and anybody that watched the game talked about it, it's like, why were you leaving? Like, first of all, TJ Watt's not a guy that you leave the best right tackle in football one-on-one with. Especially not Kaleb McGary. So you're right. Zach Robinson's going to have a lot to do it. And let's be honest, he was Penix's blindside for the 3 games, and the defenses they played, as we've said many, many times, weren't exactly spectacular defenses, but there was never, oh man, Kaleb McGary gave up a huge sack. He didn't protect him.
But think back to those teams. The Giants' defensive front is formidable. It got even better after this past year. And the Washington front is formidable. It's not like those defenses weren't good as a whole, but if you were going to identify those strengths, it's the defensive front. Mm-hmm. So, I would even say it was kind of a plus.
Yeah, and also there's some things that you can say, like, what do we always talk about in all these sports? Movable contracts. Like, you have Kaleb McGary, one that's probably created cap space this year and maybe even next year, depending on the way that it's constructed. We don't have that information yet, but I would imagine that it saves cap space this year if the Falcons want to bring someone in before the start of the season. And next year as well, they probably have more room to maneuver. And let's say they do find their right tackle of the future, whether it be a free agent that they fall in love with or whether it be someone in the draft that surprised them. We draft him in the 3rd round. He's amazing. Kaleb McGary. Trade easily movable on that contract.
Tackles don't grow on trees. And again, Falcons fans, he gets a lot of undeserved hate. He is not as bad as people make him out to be on Falcons social media. And you just said it. You find a guy wherever it might be. And he is a kind of guy where at least 10 teams would be like, he's better than our guy. Absolutely. And a lot of the times, in fact, I can't even think of one starter right now. Is there any starters other than Michael Penix? I'm blanking. Nobody good, at least. I don't think there's a single starter that's a lefty in the NFL. Tua. So, everybody else is like, well, we don't need Kaleb McGary to be our blindside. We've got that handled. We just need you to be the road grader that you are on the right side. So, and something that, never gets talked about enough, continuity up front. We are now 4.5 starters returning because New Zealand played half the season for Drew Dahlman, who was injured. And now on that right side, we're looking at so this is the 7th year they're together. A decade they're going to be together on that right side. And I know some people might just scoff at that. It matters. It matters specifically up front with those 5 big uglies.
Yeah, I mean, that tandem on the right side, when you look from a run blocking perspective, has been
some of the best in the league.
Maybe the best in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, up there with just about any. That pure right side where it's like, hey, we need a yard. Let's get it behind Chris Lindstrom and Kaleb McGary, and it's been very, very effective. Outside of maybe the Eagles that you can think of, who just have one of the best offensive lines ever put together, those guys, when you need a yard, have been absolutely fantastic. We got more Falcons talk from training camp coming up after the break. Alex, I had a feeling this was coming, but it was made official by Raheem Morris. Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix will not start week 1 of the preseason. Now, if you're doing the math, they're not going to play in week 3 because that's the week before the start of the season. They're going to be trying to make those final roster cuts. That's basically what that week's for. They're not going to play in week 1. So maybe we get to see him for a drive or 2 week 2. Now, I don't have any problem not seeing Kirk Cousins. He was the quarterback of this team last offseason. He's a veteran. You probably don't need to see much of him. But Michael Penix Jr., it just blows my mind that they are unwilling to get this guy as many reps as possible. And Penix even said, if I didn't play so well over the last 3 weeks, I'm like, well, you played good. You played slightly above average, but it wasn't like, oh man, this guy's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. Oh my God, this guy's a top 10 starting quarterback. He doesn't need any more reps. I just think it's hilarious that they continue to do this. And the Falcons have done this dating back, as we talked about, to the Arthur Smith days, and it's never really worked for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who these cats think they are. I'm as excited as anybody for Falcons football. It's probably one of the more optimistic years since we started doing this. But who do these cats think they are? You're nothing. You're nobody. You're a zero. There is absolutely 0 proven guys on this football team. I can count them on one hand. Including the coaches. Every single one of them. I have no idea who these guys think they are. It's unbelievable. Now, there's an asterisk. They play week 2, all is forgiven. It doesn't matter because you said it. When they did four games in the preseason, it's now 3. That 3rd week was generally when teams would kind of play their starters a couple of drives or a quarter or whatever it might be. And you're right, that 4th game, now the 3rd game was kind of like, okay, we figured out the first 45. Now we need to figure out the last 8. So week 3 is probably not going to be, when we see Penix. Again, week 2 is what we're hoping for. Don't need to see Kirk Cousins at all. There's no reason. You want to talk about no reason to get him injured? That's an actual case to be made because all you really need him to do is be an emergency or a tradable asset. That's it. For Michael Penix, I really do believe, listen, Michael Penix gets hurt in the preseason. I don't want to just, be a dark cloud. He was going to get hurt anyway, either way, whether that's because, the Falcons offensive line couldn't protect him or he would just put himself in that position. Now, I get minimizing risk. I absolutely get that, but I've said it multiple times that I believe, the positives outweigh the risk where it's like, hey, it might be nice if he hears, Zach Robinson in his headset before it shuts off at 20 seconds or 15 seconds where he's looking at a line of scrimmage. He's looking at refrigerators, trying to kill him. I know he's played a lot of football, but let's not act like that 3-week sample size was absolutely perfect. Again, I'm higher than him than a lot of people, but it feels like a lot of Falcons fans and honestly, Flowery Branch has not even thought about the possibility that he might not be great immediately. And week 1 isn't one of those it's an AFC opponent. This is the Buccaneers. This could come down. This could boil it down to, and then you're going to have to win on the road if they beat you, probably.
Yeah, there's this idea that gets kind of talked about, and I'm just going based on the way that Raheem Morris talks about it, that they can mimic the same pressures of a game in practice, which is just a bunch of bogus. You just cannot do that. You're not worried about getting hit. They're not hitting you.
Everybody is pulling up. Everybody.
They are not even coming close to touching you. In the games, they don't care. Like you send your starting quarterback out there, they're going to try to hit you.
Kill him.
They're going to try to kill you just like they would in the regular season, because you're probably going to be playing a bunch of guys that if they don't kill their quarterback, they ain't making the team. So there is like legitimate pressure, and you can't mimic that in practice. But it just goes back to the thing that if Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and all these greats, Matt Ryan back in the day, can go out there and play, why is Michael Penix so special that he can't? And it's not just Michael Penix. It was Desmond Ridder before him. It was Kirk Cousins before him. Like, I just don't.
The injury thing is just so overblown. Like, you saw Braylon Trice tear his ACL last year, and now you're like, oh, now I can never do it again. Like, what? How is that? Like, for all the Braylon Trices out there, there's a dozen people who benefited tremendously of, and you know what? Maybe he has called on some past players and going, what do you think? What helped you? Or maybe he's talked to Penix and goes, what helped you? What do you think? I would subscribe to the notion of like, well, you don't know anything because you played 3 games, but, you do have to ask his input. And I think, this is one of those cases where maybe Raheem Moore should lean on a Matt Ryan, a Matt Stafford, guys that he's been with, and, maybe some former coaches, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, guys who've been there, done that. I just find it really, really, really hard to believe that Penix's injury risk outweighs the benefits of getting live action reps, even if it is just one drive.
Well, we'll see. I do think he's going to play week 2. So like you said, it'll all be a moot point, but I think a lot of Falcons fans are freaking out because what we've seen in the past, and it just goes back to
it would be one thing if we started fast every single year. Like, I know we beat the Eagles week 2, but I think that was more of an horrible than anything.
They didn't look great.
No.
They didn't. They for about 3 quarters, they looked like the worst football team.
And Zach Robinson looked horrible in week 1 and week 2 up until that final quarter against the Eagles.
When it was mostly just Kirk Cousins.
It was
saying,
just Kirk, literally it was Kirk calling the plays.
Yeah, that it's about. So I mean, it's not just for Michael Penix. It's for Zach Robinson and all those things. And listen, I hope that things work out well. I hope he gets some reps there in week 2. But if he does go out there and only play 1 drive and it's 3 and out, and that's all we get to see from Michael Penix, there should be some concerns heading into week 1.
What killed this offense, whether it was Penix or Cousins in the red zone last year? Unforced errors, whether it was snap issues, whether it was penalties, those are things. Focus. Those are things when you get into the moment, you can't simulate it in a red zone drill in training camp. You cannot. You have to be in the moment. And I think it's doing this team a real disservice not to play their starters defense. I still think, with a whole new system.
Yeah, we'll see about some of those defenders. One defender that we've talked about a lot, James Pearce Jr., involved in a 3rd scuffle at training camp. We'll discuss it after the break. James Pearce Jr. has been the talk of training camp. A lot of that is because Jalen Walker hasn't been involved yet, but we did get a good update there. Jalen Walker should be back on the field for 11-on-11 sometime this week or early next week. So it does appear that minor hamstring injury is no big deal. But James Pearce Jr. on Monday involved in another scuffle. Alex, are you getting a little bit concerned at all that, hey, maybe he's got a screw too loose, I guess we could say?
I mean, until it bleeds over into the game, I don't know why anyone would be concerned. It feels like we haven't had this kind of attitude, regardless of who it is, in a very, very long time, let alone a pass rusher. It just feels like the only people complaining are maybe the people who are unaware that level of crazy, it might be what it takes to be, I don't know, a good defense. We don't know what a good maybe we should just try something else. And maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it hurts the Falcons in the regular season. But until it does, I am not going to complain about it, because what's the definition of insanity? We keep drafting nice guys, leaders, smart guys. How about we draft a dumb guy who likes to fight people? I don't know. Maybe it might work.
Yeah, I'm with you. You said it, I think you said it best when you talked about the kind of personality that you want your defensive players to have. And when you look at guys, I mean, let's just be real. Some of the best defenders that we've ever had in this league are flat out scary dudes, like dudes that would scare you if you walked past them. Like they look a little bit off, like they have a tick off. And guess what? They do. they actually have a tick off and they go a little bit hard. And we've gotten more of a glimpse of it because, the NFL can go straight into it and they'll give you some highlights about the trash talk that goes in there. But some of these guys legitimately do not shut up. Like, they are actual savages. Like, when they strap up that helmet and it's time to go between those lines, there is a mental switch that flips, and they are going to talk trash and they are going to try to inflict pain on the other team. And if that's what James Pearce is trying to do, even in practice, I got no issue with it. But like you said, it bleeds over into the games. Maybe we're having a different conversation here after week 1. But another guy that maybe we get to see a little bit more, maybe we don't get to see any of in the first week of preseason.
I mean, I don't know how anybody could be mad about this, where, the old adage, controlled aggression, a certain amount of crazy is okay within reason. It's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't tell a wild animal to be, tamed. You either let them loose or you keep drafting house cats. I mean, that's the simple fact of the matter. And you'd like to have both, but that generally does. Those guys are few and far between where a guy is so controlled but still has that gear. I mean, you said it. I started the greatest defenders of our lives, and we're younger. But even if you go further, like the Ronnie Lotts of the world, absolute psychopath. Ray Lewis, psychopath. Ed Reed, they're all crazy individuals.
You do get an occasional Calais Campbell,
that is. But guess what? He was gifted something that nobody else was. That guy is 6'8". 300 pounds
and moves like
that stuff. We're like, Ray Lewis was undersized for a lot of his career, where it's like he had to have that edge that made him different. And I think, anybody, and I haven't seen it, so maybe I'm just talking into the wind and yelling at clouds, but anybody who's complaining about this has just clearly not watched the defense long enough to be like, maybe we do try something different. I don't know.
No, I'm excited about it. I think, he has the opportunity that if he can harness that and has the self-control with that kind of attitude and with his physical gifts, I don't know how you couldn't be excited, because I keep going back to the picture that was painted where, obviously he had some off the field issues. They were minor off the field issues, but a lot of it was about this love. And all I'm seeing is a guy that loves to be physical. And this is a physical game where the most physical guys, the strongest guys, a lot of times football comes down to some simple things. Like the team that hits harder usually wins. Like it really is. Like, go look at Georgia's defense. Like they absolutely smacked the hell out of you for a long time. And by the third quarter, it's like, I'm kind of tired of hitting these guys.
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired of hitting these guys. And it's simple, but even at this level, a lot of the times it's like, if I hit you harder for 4 quarters, at the end of the game, I'm probably going to win.
It's a game of wills, and analytics be damned. I think, there's a place for it in sports, even in football. But at the end of the day, it's 11 guys, generally speaking, one guy looking across from it is as close, other than maybe UFC, the closest thing to modern day gladiators that we have, where you've got somebody running 10 yards downhill, you're running 10 yards uphill, and you're about to meet. It's a car crash every single day. This is not a game for nice guys. And I think, anybody who didn't play the game, and I'm not even saying I played it at a high level. I didn't play past high school. But even then, it takes a special kind of crazy to play this game, because you're practicing and you're just walking around with a headache every single day. Like, I think a lot of people just forget how violent this game is. When you see it on TV, it takes some of that out.
Especially when they're 6'5", 250 pounds, and everyone's running 4.4s around. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I can't wait to see this guy on the field. I am itching to see some James Pearce Jr. and Jalen Walker live in action. Hopefully you get some of that in the preseason. We're going to switch gears coming up after the break, go into some Braves talk, a few developments on the injury side of thing, and also Hurston Waldrop was the winner. He was the hero of the Speedway Classic.